Good evening and welcome to this edition of Defacto Review with Jargal Defacto and myself, Grace Brown, bringing you a weekly roundup of news and current affairs here in Mongolia. We're live on Facebook at V Television. You can also follow the conversation on Twitter, #Defacto, coming up on the programme. A new head of government, former Deputy Prime Minister Ukhnaa Khurelsukh becomes Prime Minister. Breaking the budget, how did Mongolia get a 900 billion Tugrik surplus and how can it be spent? Doctors across the country join teachers in demanding higher pay. And new data shows a 16% jump in Mongolia's Cashmere exports. We'll have the lowdown on who's buying. Thank you for joining us. We begin with Mongolia's new Prime Minister, Ukhnaa Khurelsukh, who was appointed on Wednesday, confirmed by Parliament and congratulated by President Khaltma Batulga, along with Chinese Premier Li Keqiang. He is also the president of Ulaanbaatar's Harley-Davidson fan club, the leader of the Mongolian People's Party youth faction, and he's also a colonel, so quite a colourful character by the sounds of things, Jargal.
Exactly.
He has vowed to fight corruption and strengthen the bureaucracy. Does this mean a more technocratic government? And if so, is that going to help address corruption?
Well, that's the hope of people. First of all, people expect him to be the face and career of justice, which he had promised as well. And what is it coinciding with the newly elected President Batulga mission, who had said that without politicizing, we will work together to overcome difficulties facing the country. So, and it's very interesting combination of two people. Mongolian wants to have always strong persons. And here you are. You have two strong persons together.
Two strong men in charge, yeah, it'll be interesting.
Who is both sportsmen,
Do
physically
they get on
strong.
well?
And I hope so, because the very fact that first day the president supported immediately his candidature for the PM.
Okay.
Secondly, he asked the parliament to vote as soon as possible for him and his
Batulga.
cabinet. Yes.
I mean, this is key because the relationship between these two men could have a big impact on how quickly things get done here. We've had so many hold-ups. And
in fact, since President demanded more stronger fight against corruption, Anti-Corruption Agency had activated more their works. Last week there were several interesting statements, including some very high-ranking criminal cases where 7 persons were now given to prosecutor for court. For example, a case of Khurelsukh, who was the government housing corporation head. It's about 1 billion Tugrik loan he made to somebody, nothing is done. Also, second former state official, state secretary of construction and city urban development, Irdin Bureng Trio, almost 300 billion Tugriks loan given to several groups, no report. Third, also the head of Mongolian, who is the head of the development bank, 1.3 billion Tugriks fate, and also a head of, interesting case of Oyun Dilger. This lady was a woman, was a state administration department of the General Customs Department.
so you're saying that after his announcement, there's been an increase in the number of anti-corruption investigations?
Not only, and they were now transferred, they have finished the investigation. Now they're transferring.
Finished already?
Yes.
In how many days did that all take?
No, this one was somehow, blurry, disappearing cases because it's connected with the higher ranked officials before.
Okay.
And now under the pressure of the president, they have completely finished, and now they're transferring to court. But it doesn't mean that it will go also to court. There was many cases when, hundreds of cases where corruption agency requested prosecutor to give the cases to court. They sent back, no, we don't think it is enough material here, and they were groundless or something, and they were stopped.
Right.
Many cases.
I mean, President Batulga also vowed to fight corruption. Do you think that the interests of these two men are aligned?
This is not only interests.
Are they going after the same people?
That's the good question, because down the road, I don't know at which point or at which person their conflicts will be crossed over, and then how they will
Bearing
solve.
in mind, of course, the President Batoga is with the Democratic Party, and Ukhnaa Khurelsukh, the Prime Minister, is with the Mongolian People's Party.
Yep, but however, it's the only hope of people that this is the particular time when both President and Prime Minister will not have priority of their political parties. They will put the interests of the people. At least they have promised it, and that's what we are waiting for. Well, the very sound statements by the Prime Minister.
It was very interesting because 30 MPs from Khurelsukh's own party, the MPP, were absent in that key parliamentary session, which was to appoint him. So that suggests that there's still some very big internal divides within the MPP. Can he overcome those?
That's the point. The Prime Minister is a result of split of this political party inside. And it was unavoidable, it was expected split because big conflict of interest of this group. Now we have the 65 parliament members of Mongolian People's Party, 32, 33 group. But I think this Inkbal, the speaker, the head of the political party, group 32 is becoming now 30. Because two parliament members,
faction.
Yeah, the two parliament members were with this 33 to support the candidacy of the Khurelsukh for the Prime Minister. That was the parliament member Batirdin, who is the current Minister of Defense, and Mr. Haying Hirwa, who is the political party Caucasus head.
So their absence was, in fact, to support him.
And the plus political, the group of 9 of Democratic Party, and altogether they have created consensus of 47, which were able to vote for Prime Minister. And now that means, by that same token, they will vote for the cabinet. Whoever Mr. Khurelsukh is suggesting.
Do we know when the new cabinet is likely to be formed?
Should be as soon as possible, though by constitution it should take maximum 45 days. If the parliament...
45 days from the last cabinet being dissolved?
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess so. But 45 days, if they cannot, from whatever they start off, if they cannot, they should be disseminated, whole parliament. So I don't think they are ready for that. So they will elect, even these 30 parliament members not agree with any candidates for cabinet, they will go themselves.
Well, Khurelsukh has also said he's against so-called double Del cabinet members who are also members of parliament. Do we have any indication as to who might be in running for the cabinet?
It's hard, but one thing is clear. Cabinet members cannot be from the part of the 30 of Inkbal group because they have refused to be a part of it beforehand.
Okay.
Now the matter of from this 32 who is supporting him, I think at least half of the cabinet, minimum half of the cabinet, if not majority, will be consisting of these people.
Even though they are members of parliament?
Yeah, because without their support, political system in Mongolia is such that today that he cannot proceed.
So it would be too unstable unless
so
he has
yes,
those people in
probably
key
couple
government posts.
Non-parliament members or 3, 4. Remember also the 25% should be a woman, so at least 4 women to be a member.
I mean,
of cabinet.
It's huge. They need to have a new, for example, Minister of Mining, and Khurelsukh has said that the Dubai agreement with Oyu Tolgoi needs to be investigated. That's not likely to go down too well with Rio Tinto, is it?
The issue is, in Mongolian context, whether there was any kind of corruption, tips, hints, anything from Mongolian side, probably. That's what he, in his context of speech, he said that the mining policy of this country were not much benefiting the ordinary people.
But Rio Tinto have said that the agreement is absolutely set in stone now, that it can't be reinvestigated anymore.
Yeah, however, Prime Minister promised to recheck what was involved in not only a Dubai agreement, which was confirming the underground mine of
Yes.
OT, but general.
Phase 2.
General mine of 2 agreements with OT. So, however, that's de facto, he said, but I don't know what will happen afterwards. But we watch very carefully what's going on, as
Certainly.
OT is only a project that is really playing the most important role for the economy.
It's set to account for a third of this country's GDP in the next decade. So
the other thing he also said was he will be fighting very seriously with people who thinks there is no rule in the regulations in Mongolia.
right, rule of law.
And he said also why the court and power security organizations are working for the order of few individuals, he said, and why people should be afraid of security officers instead of watching them. That's the sort of strong statements he made. So let's see what's going on to happen with the corruption. But one thing is clear, that these two leaders of the country today is going to go in sync against corruption. That's the most expected thing. And even if they fight something seriously for making justice more in this society, then there will be huge respect from side of public.
Another key thing to consider, of course, is that $5.5 billion International Monetary Fund-led bailout. Khurelsukh's appointment puts Mongolia back on track to receiving that. However, they have recently withdrawn this next year's budget bill because they said the government may wish to make changes. So, you know, what does this mean for the bailout?
This is again, they will make amendments to the budget.
And those amendments then have to be reapproved by the IMF in Washington, D.C.?
No, but there are a few principal things agreed with them, for example, not to increase the public salary, for example.
Yes.
This sort of things. And,
which we'll have more on later in the program.
Yeah, but however, IMF was last time, for example, a little bit soft on some smaller changes. And that's why they are misusing this time now the issue we want to talk about, the budget revenue increase. Budget revenue have increased 500 billion tugriks. But however, doesn't mean that the budget has no deficit. It has a huge deficit.
So that's exactly, you know, more than 900 billion tugriks, and they now need to distribute 430 billion. Firstly, why is there a difference, in those two numbers?
No. Budget deficit, budget revenue was now more than 500 billion tugriks than planned.
Yeah.
So they have received now something 500 billion, half a trillion, how to spend. And then now, in the budget amendments, they are suggesting they will spend it for other, it said, for the priority directions or directions of our political party program. It includes like repairment of hospitals, administration buildings, school buildings, etc.
And are they allowed to do that in the scope of the IMF agreement, or do they need to put that money towards paying off their debts? Mongolia has $23 billion in debt, total debt.
First, it does not decrease the deficit. Otherwise, if they have put a separate, they could decrease the deficit. But IMF, last time, remember, during the presidential elections, they have suddenly paid 161 billion tugriks for children. IMF said, okay, they had the revenue, so they can do it. But now I think there will be the same approach on their side.
Right.
But the bigger issue is principal issue. But its bigger issue is if Mongolia had, say, public sovereign wealth fund, then there will be no issue. Because this 500 billion tugriks is majority Majority of it because the increase of coal price and coal export.
That's right.
And,
Commodity prices
sovereign
have
wealth
seen
fund,
a resurgence this year, haven't they?
Sovereign wealth fund will take any money which is more than planned to that fund, and that fund should be abroad, so that doesn't impact on the payment balance of the country because it's for long term. So the good thing is,
Will Mongolia have its own sovereign wealth fund, do you think?
Good thing is,
future?
Prime Minister Khurelsukh promised that he will create sovereign wealth fund.
Which means that the fruits of mining booms can be saved for later years.
Yes, for future
which
generations.
Which has always been such a problem here.
Then
this is, I mean, the 6th IMF bailout that Mongolia has had, despite
yeah, but this time it's even
wealth.
larger. And it's even more important because I think down the road, this sort of oversupply will always be happening. So, okay, now when oversupply is happening, how about undersupply? What will happen if the deficit will increase, the price will go down? So that's why we want to have good buffer for the sort of fluctuation of commodity prices in Mongolia. So only solution we see that this is the sovereign wealth fund.
Actually, one MP, C.H. Olan, was opposed to distributing the money for doctors and teachers, saying, quote, budget adjustment should be made to improve budget indicators. So that's quite an interesting conflict that they have to wrestle with.
Mr. Olan was several times Minister of Finance, and he knows what he is talking about. And actually, budget is such a thing. It is not like your pocket money, you know. You have extra money, you spend it. You know. There should be a law, and there should be certain indicators which says what you should do. And Mr. Olan is referring to these provisions of budget laws, and which is not the case of other parliamentarians who have either no experience or they see very short-term benefit for themselves.
Well, speaking of doctors and teachers, doctors and nurses from across Mongolia are now demanding a 50% pay rise. That's after teachers protested over their pay last month. 1,000 doctors from provinces across Mongolia, all 21 IMEGs, demonstrated in Sukhbata Square this week. According to Dornod IMEG's Union of Medical Staff, the minimum monthly wage is just 300,000 tugriks. I mean, that's about $120 a month. That's not enough for anybody to live on.
Well, there is some not clear statistics on that point. For example, the head of 3rd hospital said, the general hospital head said that doctor on the average receives 640,000 tugriks, which is about $420, and the nurse 550,000 tugriks.
Is this the 3rd hospital here?
Yes, in Ulaanbaatar.
So is that part of the problem, that doctors in the capital are perhaps being paid more?
It is.
Those in provinces?
It is a part of problem, yes. But the more confusing is, even you can increase the salary now, as they suggested, okay, if you have money, you suggest you increase. But it is not the solution of the problem. Why? Because Mongolian medical sector is, medical care, health care is so confused, consisting of private hospital and state-owned hospital. For example, just around General Clinic number 3 in the western part of Ulaanbaatar city, just around this building there are over 40 private hospitals, private clinics. And now doctors go from their own state-owned offices, say they work for public half day, then go to their private sector and they work also half day. So many
it's
doctors,
a bit like the teachers, they're also overworked, yeah.
And, but overworked in which sense? Because they now receive two kinds of income. One is a state salary, the other is private doctor salary. And we don't know where is the difference between. And they even bad practices like the doctor in his state cabinet will describe medicine that is available only his private hospital, you see.
Okay.
So this sort of unclear...
So the medical sector is not
it's very
regulated
blurry, not regulated or under-regulated sector where some doctors receive incredibly good money, but some those who has no private hospitals or combination or not working in two places, they have a less salary. So it is a matter because all is this created this confusion by our healthcare insurance system, which gives certain money to any kind of hospital, private or public, based on the how many hospital bed they have. How many of them occupy, they pay money anyway. So this whole support system is making confusion, not only in healthcare industry, but also in education. They give kind of current expenses for a head of a student in both types of schools. So many officials create their own private schools and they receive money from the budget based on the head of the students. So it's another confusion. So both have very same problems created by very same way, and both need the same solutions, which is a right and clear combination of private and public sector, and right and clear rules to compensate their costs on behalf of the customer. So that's the unclearness in our public
But private
governance.
sector involvement that is also subject to government regulation, is that what you're saying?
It is, but yes, of course, but private sector and public sector is receiving the same amount of money from the insurance system. And the insurance system works in such a way that even you are an officer, you paid all your life a lot of money, you receive the same service like the guy who had not paid, or very symbolic, just 6,000 per month.
Why is that? I mean,
that's the issue.
that doesn't make any sense.
That's the issue. Why the whole life you have been paying all the insurance and some people even don't get sick and they don't receive anything. Okay, it's insurance. But people who needs to receive quality medical care is not receiving that at the same level, both social level. So this is the big confusion of our half communist, half socialist, half capitalist system of Mongolia.
Well, by October 11th, the doctors say they will go on strike unless their demands get at least a response. Is that likely to happen?
Yeah, whatever happens, new Prime Minister said, we cannot pay anybody, no teachers, no doctors, any increase salary this year. But from next or a year after, he will eventually, in a planned way, they will increase the salary, which was the way actually somehow before, depending on the way how this consumer goods basket price increases, kind of inflation, they were accounted into consideration. They were taken into consideration and they were keep increasing certain, not in an inflationary way, the salary, which was more or less get people working normally. But now this one is stopped due to huge foreign debt and domestic debt of the government.
Yeah.
So which actually we are now losing the balance of what we create and what we spend.
Well, they said that they were paying tuberculosis physicians so far 30% more. I suppose that's because of the nature of the job and the higher risk that it would carry.
Not only, this kind of a lot particular provisions are inside of these regulations. And I think they deserve it, they do. But if you take general picture, it's a matter of general average salary. So first, what combination of private and public sectors in medical care? And how about people are receiving two salaries from two sides? And how to regulate it? So this is so much kind of one of the most corrupt public sectors, healthcare and education.
Oh dear, that's not what you want. Well,
good thing is we are discussing it.
Yeah.
And we will fix it. Without discussing openly, straight bluntly, we cannot solve it. We cannot demand politicians to solve it. So public in general, because of all this, we will demand the problem to be solved. Mostly it's an issue of to be more efficient, more economic, and no corruption. That's what the people want from the governance.
Well, one thing that does seem to be going well are Mongolia's Cashmere exports, which saw a 16% jump in the first 8 months of this year, reaching $23.7 million. Does this mean that Mongolia's economy is diversifying the way that the government had hoped?
In terms of Kashmir, it is the only hope that it shows somehow our diversification. But there is certain problems. You see, Mongolia have 70 million cattle, right? Cows, sheep, goats, horses, camels. Okay, five major branch of our way of life. Okay, of animal husbandry. But we have altogether 70 million of them. But just goats, 20 million.
And the goats are the most destructive, aren't they? Eating up the grasslands.
That's the problem. And out of this 20 million goats, we received this year 8,500 tons Kashmir only. But 70% of them are sold directly to China because there is no export tax.
70% of the goats are sold directly to China.
Of washed Kashmir. The remaining 30% is processed into, it's called tops. Okay, the second category, washed in particular compound.
I read an article on the AmCham newswire that said 90% of the Kashmir went to Italy. Is this the
90% of these tops?
Yeah.
Half prepared.
The finished product.
Finished products for weaving. They went to Italy, and then I saw in Italy the production. They take our Kashmir.
Did you?
Yes. They wash it again with particular water. It's so sophisticated. At the end, Chanel, the major brands, receive Kashmir from Italian company, which is actually Mongolian Kashmir. And by the way, 40% of Mongolian Kashmir needs a year is supplied by Mongolia, 50% by China, 10% by other smaller countries. Not small, I mean big countries, but with fewer goats. But very interesting thing is, out of this Mongolian Kashmir, 70% is directly goes to China, which is increasing Chinese supply in the world. So now Kashmir...
And the trouble with, I own some Chinese Kashmir and some Mongolian Kashmir, but Chinese Kashmir is often mixed with chemicals. So does this then give Mongolia's Kashmir a bad rap if they're marketing it as Mongolian Kashmir after mixing it with other materials, synthetics?
There is big marketing fight, I guess, and it's true that our Kashmir is... You know why our Kashmir is better, you know?
It is. It is much heavier.
You know
you can
why?
feel the difference.
Because Kashmir, the thin Kashmir makes warm. Thinner the fiber, warmer the Kashmir wear. And why they are thinner? Because it's colder. Our north part of northern part is more colder than the southern part, which is China.
Yeah.
So some particular, Bayinhongo, for example, have a particular good Kashmir, which is mixed with other one and sold like something middle class. And actually, if we have separately those Kashmir, it could be a top brand in the world.
Well, it's certainly Kashmir season now that it's snowing again. And that brings this edition of Defacto Review to an end. Thank you very much for joining us. Hope you can tune in again next week. From Jargal and myself, Sakhan Amrare, good night.
Thank you very much for watching us.